I was processing with my wife today on how I was feeling about life. I don't know about you, but on Sundays or days when life slows down a little more than it does on other days, you tend to feel more of the raw emotion involved with it. You tend to get the chance to think about some of the things that you haven't thought about, or some of the feelings and emotions that have been living inside of you make their way to the top because there is time to entertain them or to feel them and not be numbed by the pace of life. And so I was telling her today that even though everything was going well today, I felt this sense of sadness, this not overwhelming, but penetrating sadness that let me know that it was present. And in this presence, I was either to question it and why it was there, or I was either to make acquaintance with it and live with it as I did everything else. And so I began to question it. And one of the questions that came up in my mind, because I know there are others that struggle with situations like this. Well, what is sadness? I know I feel it, but can I define it? And how I define sadness is those times when our life is has expectations or desires for certain things, and our reality sits outside of it. But these things are special things to our hearts. They are missed opportunities. They are regrets. They are wishes that things would be different, that sadness sits one step lower than disappointment. It sits higher than being dejected or being in desperation. Sadness sits in the middle of those tensions. And then what I realized about sadness is that souls who are suffering with sadness are all often in search of words to heal this sadness, to describe this sadness, to process this sadness. But instead of words, we don't find the words. But if we know God and if we know hope and if we understand how life works at times, instead of words, what we find is the solution that sits in the sufficiency of God's sovereignty. What do I mean by that? I think Psalms 42 is one of the best places where we find this. Psalms 42, verse 1, as a deer pants for flowing streams, so pants my soul for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. And I think oftentimes when we read Psalm 42, we misrepresent the feeling that the psalmist has, that is going on in the psalm. Often we talk about as a deer pants for flowing streams, so pants my soul for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God, as a desire that sits on top of satisfaction. But instead, I think if we are to grasp Psalm 42 the right way, that this is a desire that actually sits in the place of sadness, in the place of disappointment, in the place of desperation, in the place of being destitute, that the psalmist is not saying everything is going right and I have this amazing thirst for you, that I'm just thirsty for you because I'm overwhelming with joy. The psalmist is indeed saying that my soul is parched. And I haven't been able to refresh it in the way that I want to refresh it. But I just want to let you know that in the midst of this parchedness, in the midst of this deep thirst, that the thing that I am thirsting for is you. When shall I come and appear before God? My tears have been my food day and night, while they say to me all the day long, where is your God? Sadness is something that when we question it, we're not only questioning it, we are questioning the location of God. Where is God in the midst of this? Sadness can happen for many reasons. There are many valid reasons. There's grief, there's loss, there's rejection, there's trials, there's tribulation. But then sadness can also happen for selfish reasons when we're looking at our life the wrong way and we think that we should have something and we don't have it. And because we don't have it and we have an impatience on how we're looking at our life, or we have the wrong motivation or the wrong expectation, it leads us to that sadness. But sadness also can be selfless. I think my sadness today was selfless, that I was reflecting on church and the church and some of the areas where we are lacking, and that at times we go every Sunday to get our fix, but nothing much seems to get fixed. That instead of us as believers wanting to be instruments of effective righteousness, that we rather be instruments of carnal and worldly driven image, that we don't want to be image bearers of the true one, of the God who has sent us, but we rather find an image that gets us some type of currency in this world that is passing away, that we rather post our pics with celebrities and all of those kinds of people rather than actually be in life with those who are in our communities and that God has called us to. It was that kind of sadness, a sadness that comes about because of where systems are. But what the psalmist is saying, getting back to Psalm 42, is where is God? In the midst of this, God, where are you? But then he does something. He says, these things I remember as I pour out my soul, how I would go with the throng and lead them in the procession to the house of God with glad shouts and songs of praise, a multitude keeping festival. The remedy for sadness at times is to reflect and to remember. For those of you who have been married and lost a spouse and you're missing them in the midst of the day, in the midst of the year and months, one of the things that can help you is to remember. But remembering keeps you solid in the moment, but it doesn't always give you what you need to go on to the future. Remembering gives you that spark of life used to be better, but what that spark does is that it pushes you not into a solution to handle your sadness, but a sovereignty that the same God that made life good back then will then make life good for you again, minus what was present there. He's remembering how he would go with the throng and lead them in procession to the house of God with glad shouts and songs of praise, a multitude keeping festival. But then now that is missing, now that he's not in that season, now that his life is void of that event, of that reoccurrence, of that mode of worship, he asks his soul a question: why are you cast down, O my soul? And why are you in turmoil with me? Hope in God. Future tense, for I shall again praise him. That often when we are in our sadness and we're suffering in this sadness of our souls, and we are searching for not only words to describe it and to define it, but we're searching for solutions to get it through, that oftentimes we don't get those hard, concrete solutions that move us to the next level. What we get as a solution is a place to rest, a place of refuge, a place of belonging in the sufficiency of God and his sovereignty. That today you might feel hopeless, but if you hope in God, verse 5, B part, for I shall again praise him, my salvation and my goal. He goes back to the actual moment that he's in. My soul is cast down within me. Therefore, I remember you, remembering again from the land of Jordan and Hermon, from Mount Mizar, deep calls the deep at the roar of your waterfalls. All your breakers and your waves have gone over me. By day, the Lord commands his steadfast love. Right here in verse 8 is where I realize that a part of finding that sufficiency in God's sovereignty is praying specifically to the aches and the pains of where sadness is bothering you. Oh God, I miss my mother and my father around the holidays because it just look upon everybody else that's enjoying their family, and I don't want to covet, and uh, I don't want to ruin the blessings or overlook the blessings. I can't ruin them, but I don't want to overlook the blessings that you have on my life right now. But 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 I miss my parents. That's somebody's sadness out there. So can you do this specific thing for me? Or I miss my mate in the times that are challenging for me the most, or it's when I'm going to bed and I remember I used to have someone who protected me and made sure the doors were locked, or kissed me on my forehead at night, or we laughed and shared a bowl of ice cream, that I can make it through most of the day. But when the night hours come, I feel that sadness more than ever. So God, can you specifically do this? The psalmist says that in verse 8, by day the Lord commands his steadfast love. He gives it specific instruction on where to intrude and make place in our lives. And at night, this song is with me. A prayer to the God of my life. I say to God, my rock, why have you forgotten me? Why do I go on mourning? Here's the root of the psalmist's sadness: because of the oppression of the enemy. What is the root of your sadness? Because of the regret, because of the failure, because of the disappointment, because of the grief, because of the loss, because of a current broken relationship, because of a current failure. What is the root? His is because of the oppression of the enemy. The psalmist, as with a deadly wound in my bones, my adversaries taunt me, while they say to me all the day long, where is your God? And he concludes, why are you cast down, O my soul, and why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God. The sufficiency is in his sovereignty. He's saying, hope in God, because he sees, he knows. And when you hope in God, know that he's going to turn it around. For I shall again praise him. He is my salvation and my God. Sadness is one of those things that, if you don't believe that God is sufficient enough in his sovereignty, that he will show you how to swim to shore through all the emotions and the hard days, that you will drown, and how overwhelming it can get. But what gets you out of this sadness, what gets you to shore, what helps you swim through it, what gets you through the flood. You know, sadness comes one day, you're walking in life and the land is dry and the sun is out, and then all of a sudden a torrential rain has come and you're stuck in the flood of emotion, of loneliness, of sadness. Remember that sadness is defined as my life when I have a certain expectation, desire, or I am missing something that I once had, and I want life to go on a certain way, but that certain way right now is outside of my reality. That gap that I feel in between my expectation and my reality is what I call sin. That I hope in God in spite of, that he'll turn my life around and shall praise him again, because he is my salvation and he is my God. He is one in verse 8 that commands his steadfast love. He is one in verse 8 that puts a song in my heart at night. He is one that has given me much in my life to remember when it was good, and that remembrance can give me a sufficiency to get through right now. But if I am going to get through the future, the only thing that will be sufficient is me taking place residence, refuge, cover, and belonging in his sovereignty, knowing one day that he will turn it around for the sadness to go away, for joy to take over from our sadness, and for happiness to peek through the clouds of my life again. God bless you.